Good afternoon. Opening statement, as the court has kind of explained to you, is I view this as kind of a roadmap. It's certainly not everything that you're going to see and hear in this case, but it does provide at least some guidance and a little bit of a highlight of what I anticipate the evidence to be. And that's all it is. As the court has already kind of explained to you, there are three possibilities, or I'm asking for three possible verdicts, one of which are the three. I want to emphasize one thing on the felony murder aspect of it. You're going to hear throughout the course of this case, you're going to hear me argue probably in opening statement, but certainly in closing statement, that for felony murder, we're alleging that the defendant attempted to kidnap Miss Bletch.
Okay, let me just instruct the jury on that at this time, then, Mr. Olson.
Sure.
To establish an attempt, the prosecutor has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Willis intended to commit the crime of kidnapping and that he took some action towards committing that crime and failed to complete it. And it's not enough to prove that he made preparations for committing the crime, things like planning crime or arranging how it will be committed. Those are just preparations. They don't qualify as an attempt. In order to qualify as an attempt, the action must go beyond mere preparation to the point where the crime would have been completed if it had not been interrupted by outside circumstances. So to qualify as an attempt, the act must clearly and directly be related to the crime of kidnapping and not some other objective. And the defendant must have been either committing or helping someone else commit that crime of kidnapping, and to help means to perform acts or give encouragement before or during the commission of the crime that aids or assists in its commission. And at the time of giving the aid or encouragement, the defendant must have intended the commission of the kidnapping. So I wanted to be clear about that because I didn't cover that in my instructions. So go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Judge. So as we work through this case over these couple of weeks, I want you to keep that in mind, that we're alleging that during the course of this particular murder, that Mr. Willis was attempting to kidnap and abduct Rebecca Bletch prior to shooting her dead. The other thing that I want to just bring to your attention, we talk about intent, we talk about thinking about what a person's state of mind is. The law gives us some kind of clues and hints on what to look for. For example, how the crime was committed, what was done, the type of weapon that was used, the wounds that were inflicted. And in this particular case, you are going to be allowed to hear other acts that we've alleged the defendant committed in order to help form and decide for yourselves whether or not at the time that Rebecca Bletch was murdered, not only did he intend to kill her, but also at that time he intended to abduct her as well. So as we wade through all of this testimony and all of these exhibits, I want you to keep that in mind, that to really focus in on the intent and what you have at your disposal in order to look at that. This case all starts on June 29th, 2014. That particular day was a Sunday, and you're going to hear from witnesses who know Rebecca fairly well, that on that particular day she had worked a shift at her place of employment, Sanctuary of the Shores. She'd finished her shift on that late Sunday afternoon and made her way home. And as is typical for Miss Bletch, she was a person that enjoyed working out after work. And this particular Sunday was no different than anything else. She put on her workout clothes and set off down Automobile Road, south on Automobile Road, in her normal workout routine. You'll hear from a relative, actually, a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Bletch, who lives very close to, or had lived close to Rebecca at the time, and he will tell you that he actually saw her come home from work that particular day and saw her go out on her routine, whether it be speed walk or jog, that particular late afternoon. What he didn't know, and certainly what Rebecca didn't know, was that this was going to be the last time that she had a chance to work out. The other witnesses, or the next witness you're going to hear from, is Michelle Clint. The Clints live on Automobile Road. And on that particular Sunday afternoon, right around 6 p.m., they were in their vehicle heading south on Automobile Road to do something that particular afternoon. They made it through the intersection of Riley Thompson when they noticed something laying on the side of the road. And initially, Mrs. Clint will tell you, they thought it was an animal until they got up close and then realized it was a human being. Mrs. Clint will tell you that she got out of her vehicle, that she's a nurse by trade, that she approached the body, didn't know who it was, could tell right away that there was a head wound, a pretty significant head wound, and you will hear the 911 call her husband makes. And you'll hear him describe the scene, and at that point in time, it was their belief that maybe this individual had been involved in a hit-and-run accident. You also hear from the first responders that arrive on the scene, Deputy Kennar and Deputy Foster, and they will tell you that as they arrive on the scene, they see Mrs. Clint and I believe a EMS worker providing CPR, because what Michelle Clint will tell you is that when they first get there, Rebecca is got a faint pulse. She's kind of breathing, but it's not very good, very labored breathing, but she's essentially still alive. Deputy Kennar is the first officer to arrive on the scene, helps take over CPR. And what's interesting is that Deputy Kennar will tell you that across the way, so almost directly across the road, or automobile road, from where Rebecca was laying, he noticed and discovered a pile of things. That pile being earphones, sunglasses, a cell phone carrying case, and a cell phone, neatly piled across the street. Deputy Kennar will also tell you that as he started to investigate this scene, he discovers in the middle of Automobile Road a spent .22 shell casing. He'll tell you that it was a CCI brand. That'll be important. Deputy Foster will tell you that by the time he arrived on the scene, the once unknown body was actually identified as Rebecca Bletch. Unfortunately, Mrs. Clint knew who she was and was able to recognize her once they were able to turn her over. First responder also recognized who she was, and they called her cell phone to see if that cell phone across the way on the roadway would actually ring, and it did. By the time Deputy Foster arrived, Rebecca was moved into the ambulance where the medical examiner investigator was working, and he, along with the investigator, began looking at and seeing what was going on. It was at that time, ladies and gentlemen, they discovered that she had at least one, maybe two bullet wounds to her head. This turned from a hit and run now to a potential homicide scene. And as I indicated, both Deputy Kennar and Deputy Foster observed the pile of things across the street. Both observed the shell casing in the middle of the roadway. You also hear from Brian Harris, who at the time was the evidence tech. He was a detective with the Sheriff's Department. He has since retired and is working part-time with Norton Shores, but at the time he was a detective and an evidence tech. He came out to process the scene. And we'll go through the photographs and whatnot of what he processed. But what's interesting in his processing of the scene, that where Rebecca had laid in the ground, in the grass, he discovered another .22. 2013, the defendant purchased the 2006 Dodge Caravan. Based off of that information, Detective Schultz generates a photo lineup, which you will see, presents it to MJN, and MJN says, that's the guy that pulled up. That's the guy. What is he doing? That's the guy. That guy happens to be the defendant. Based off of that information, detectives and investigators worked very quickly to put a plan together that involved searching not only the defendant's home, but also that 2006 Dodge Caravan. So on May 17th, 2016, the defendant is finishing his shift at Herman Miller. He's stopped by investigators. His van is confiscated and put in a secure location. And on that particular day, two searches happened simultaneously. One at 1842 South Sheridan, where the defendant lived, and two on the van itself. On the South Sheridan residence, investigators find all sorts of computer equipment, external hard drives, flash drives. The other thing that's significant that they find is in the shed, you'll see pictures of this, kind of tucked up on the rafters, they find a plastic bag with tinfoil, and inside that tinfoil are two pairs of women's underwear. That'll be significant. Search of the van proves to be very interesting. In the search of the van, investigators find, and you will see both photographs as well as the actual physical evidence taken from the van. These Dodge Caravans had that stow-and-go type stuff, where you could actually stow stuff beneath hidden panels, for lack of a way to express it. Well, in one of those hidden panels, investigators find a toolbox. This toolbox had a padlock on it. Inside this toolbox, shocks and conscience. Inside this toolbox, investigators find things like a ball gag, J-hook, chains, rope, handcuffs, gloves, vibrators, dildos, a mini rape kit. Underneath the driver's seat, investigators discover a small safe. Inside that small safe, investigators find gloves. They find needles. They find a bottle of insulin. But more importantly, they find a Walther P-22 handgun and 22 long rifle ammunition PCI. The serial numbers of that Walther P-22 have been obliterated. Shortly thereafter, investigators do a search warrant at 3038 Bailey. 3038 Bailey was a residence that was once owned by the defendant's grandfather, who was deceased. They've been deceased for a few years. The defendant had kind of taken ownership. You're going to see, obviously, photographs from that particular search. You're going to see that on the main doors there was a rudimentary kind of padlock system, and the keys to those padlocks were on the keys of that were in the defendant's possession at the time of his arrest. You're also going to see that investigators find in the garage, in a garbage can crumpled up, a piece of notebook paper. And on that notebook paper is a checklist. Looks like a rape kit checklist. What you need. Some of the things we discover in the van, some of the things we don't discover that are checked off. Like gasoline and matches. We're going to learn through the course of this trial that investigators execute a search warrant to get a handwriting sample of the defendant. We'll go through that. And those handwriting samples were then evaluated by a handwriting expert at the MSP level. And that, in that expert's opinion, that note that you will see for yourself, you get a chance to see and read, was written by the defendant. The other interesting discovery in the basement of 3038 Bailey was several, about 11, combination of bleach bottles and tied with bleach costumes. We'll talk about that as well. Now let's get to the forensics of this case. I talked about that timeline that the defendant gave Corporal Hare, if you recall. you're going to hear from a gentleman, Sergeant Jim McDonald of the MSP, Michigan State Police. And Sergeant McDonald, his expertise is in kind of cell phones, and cell site data mapping. He's going to talk about, as things were being discovered, going back and getting the cell phone records of the defendant. And looking at April 26, 2013. And finding, and you'll see this, and finding that at 11:23, the defendant's cell phone is pinging off an area that is 3038 area. And what's significant about that is that it's his residence phone calling his cell phone. You're also going to see that that thing happens at midnight, 11:59, at midnight, and at 12:23. All taken in the area of 3038 Valley on April 26, 27, 2003. Indicating he wasn't at home. You also hear from computer crime lab folks on the deep dive that we took, investigators took, I should say, into the electronic computer equipment taken from his house. And I'll be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, what you're going to hear and see is going to shock and rock your world. The defendant was heavily into the dark web. Dark web. Deep dark web form. In fact, one of the more disturbing things that investigators find that you will hear and see is that he had a rather large collection of rape, capture, kill victims. Not one, not two, several hundred. You're also going to find, and you'll hear testimony from these experts, that during that 2013-2012 period, the defendant was doing a lot of internet searching for Walter accessories, holsters. One of the more significant finds that you'll hear from the witness stand that was found is that during the, again, forensic review of the computer stuff, investigators find a file labeled VICS, V-I-C-S. Within that file, there are two sub-files with initials. We talked about that. And the secret code and what it represents. One of those sub-files, under the VICS folder, belonged to Rebecca C. Black. We'll go through the context of that. The obsession that the defendant had for this catch. You're also going to hear, as I indicated, from Ryan Hehouse of the Secret Service, you're also going to hear from a gentleman by the name of Larry Brooks. Mr. Brooks works for Chrysler. He has been a design engineer for Chrysler for over 30 years. Comes in with a lot of experience in design. And you are going to learn, as I learned through the course of this, the uniqueness that cars today actually have. As Mr. Brooks will testify, cars have patents to them, which make certain features of cars unique to that car and that car only. He'll talk to you about that. We'll show you some of those patents. You get a chance to see them when we park there and do it. But Mr. Brooks will tell you what Chrysler did as far as the MJN part, the still shots they were given and what they were able to do with that, how they were able to narrow down that list of 31,000 VINs to keep whittling them down. We'll talk about that. But more importantly, he also had a chance to review a couple videos. One in the Jessica Herring investigation from Boyer Coin. Boyer Coin is located off of Old Grand Haven Road. In fact, you're going to hear that when you go north on Old Grand Haven Road from the Center Point Mall, not only do you pass by Boyer Coin, but it's also the most direct route to get to 3038. Mr. Brooks had an opportunity to review the Boyer Coin video, and he's going to come in and talk to you about what he sees in that video and what he can tell you. More importantly, Mr. Brooks also had a chance to look at a McCormick's gas station video. McCormick's that is situated at Russell and Bard Road. We'll look at the map and I'll show you where that is. But for an individual who had to get to US 31 to go south, say to their home on South Sheridan, from automobile, going from automobile to Riley Thompson to Russell is the quickest route to get to US 31. And you will see stills that 10 minutes, roughly after the 911 call, there is a silver leaf going past. Mr. Brooks will tell you what he sees and how he can classify that particular. But I want you to pay very close attention to his testimony. Now I talked to you that there, and you will see, there was a ton of forensic DNA work done in this case. These cases, I should say. A lot of evidence was going to the lab as investigators were trying to figure out if they could make a forensic DNA match to anyone that might be a suspect. You're going to hear from 4 of those lab folks. And we're going to go through everything that they did. But to give you some highlights, our MSP lab, our DNA folks, were able to find the defendant's DNA profile on the trigger and grip of the P-22 handgun. They were able to find his DNA profile on the P-22 slide. You're going to hear also, as I indicated, there were a couple of pairs of gloves found in that toolbox. One particular pair of gloves was a Reebok gloves, kind of like baseball style gloves. And the lab, they'll talk about the analysis they did on that. So what they're going to tell you is that on the interior, so on the inside of one of those gloves, they find the defendant's DNA profile. But more importantly, on the outside of that particular glove, they find the DNA profile of the victim. The handgun, as I indicated, the serial numbers were obliterated. And you'll hear from Lieutenant Crump, that's a common thing to happen. If somebody either gets or steals a handgun, they try to obliterate the serial number, because if you know anything about guns, that's kind of the identifying mark. That ties you to a particular handgun. When you go and buy a handgun at a store and you make it through the background check, that serial number is attached to your name, so that if that gun ever comes up, we know who it belongs to. So one of the first things people will try to do when they steal a handgun is get rid of that, so that it can't be traced back to the true owner. Unfortunately for the defendant, the MSP lab has an ability to restore, and most handgun manufacturers now have secondary areas where they hide serial numbers. We'll show you that. We'll talk about it. That serial number comes back to a registered owner. Her name is Michelle Snatella. And why Michelle Snatella is important in this particular case is this. Michelle Snatella happens to be a co-worker of the defendant. Work the same shift, work in the same area. She will be testifying, obviously, and she'll talk about the fact that, as I indicated, that they're co-workers, that they work together for some 7 or 8 years, that they work the same shift, the same area. Basically, their relationship is just at the workplace. They don't have anything outside the workplace. That she'll talk about the fact that when she bought the gun, and we'll show you that, we'll show you the paperwork, she bought the gun in 2012, she would often have conversations at the workplace about that particular gun, including conversations with the defendant. What is interesting, and I want you to pay attention to, what is important in this case is Ms. Snotella will tell you that when she purchased the gun in 2012, that gun came equipped with a laser sight. And she will tell you that she's not much of a gun person, never really has been. She'll tell you she shot the gun maybe once, maybe twice. That was about it. She'll also tell you that she kept that gun in her bedroom, in her closet area. That typically, if she wasn't traveling out of town, she kept her house unlocked. And if you recall, ladies and gentlemen, I talked to you about the underwear, right, that we found in the rafters of the shed at the defendant's residence. DNA folks are going to tell us a couple of things. One, that Ms. Snotella's profile is on both pages. And the defendant's profile is on one of those pages. In fact, Ms. Snotella will be presented those pairs of underwear, and she will tell you, those are my underwear. She'll also tell you that those underwear would be located in the same room, roughly the same spot, as where I would keep my P-22 handgun. You'll also hear and see, ladies and gentlemen, that during a brief period in March, early March, Ms. Snotella was working her regular third shift, the defendant had that weekend. And she will tell you that she recalls coming home and seeing snowmobile tracks in her yard. The defendant was an avid snowmobile. In fact, asked the defendant if in fact he had been by her house on a snowmobile, and she will say he said, yes, I was. What a perfect combination. Unlocked house, handgun, and I guess, for his own personal needs, 2 pairs of underwear. Finally, you're going to hear, as I indicated, from Jeff Crump, MSP firearms expert, who's been doing it for many, many years. He did all the forensic ballistic analysis in the Rebecca Bletch investigation. He's going to provide to you some background on the process that he goes through, what guns do, what bullets do when they're fired, what shell casings do when they're fired. The fact that both fired rounds and shell casings will leave very distinct marks as they are being fired through the chamber of a gun and as they're going through the barrel of a gun. That these marks can then later be compared and identified. And he will tell you that he was given the shell casings from the Rebecca Bletch crime scene. And even prior to finding the P-22 handgun, based off of the shell casings that he was able to look at and the recovered fragments that were taken from the autopsy, he was already leading investigators down the idea that you may want to be looking for a Walter type gun. He'll tell you that the 3 shell casings match each other, i.e. they were fired from the same gun. But more importantly, once that P-22 gun was found in the defendant's van, this very same van that he was driving and picked up on May 16th or May 17th, 2016, he will be able to tell, through his analysis, he will tell you in his testimony that not only did that P-22 fire the shell casing, but that P-22 handgun fired the bullets that killed Rebecca Bletch. At the end of this case, during closing arguments, I will spend probably a lot of time going through each and every element and matching up the evidence that you would have seen and heard to the elements of the crime. That's it. When we get to that point, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be asking you to find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. Because the evidence is going to show, beyond a reasonable doubt, that he killed Rebecca Blash in a premeditated way with an intent to kill. And or during the course of attempting to abduct her. Felony murder. At that point, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about all that evidence and the stuff that you haven't seen or heard yet.